My name is Dr. Kathleen Swanevelder. I'm a dentist and I have a small practice in Houghton in Johannesburg. And I'm very happy with my work and how I worked. I grew up in Johannesburg, went to an ordinary school, and then somehow by magic I got into dentistry, which wasn't easy in those days. And then I've been in private practice since I qualified in July 1980. Well, as most people know, it's very difficult to get selected for these things. And when I arrived at university, my father, number one, wouldn't pay for anything because I was a girl, and girls weren't meant to have tertiary education. So I decided, well, that's definitely out of the question. I'm definitely going to university. So I went down to the bursaries and loans department at Wits at the time, and I got applications for every single bursary and loan that was available, for ones that didn't have men only on the application form. And I used to spend a week filling in all the application forms so that I would get some money. And I always managed to get sufficient money to pay for my tuition and for my living expenses. So I did a BSc first, and then I realized you could not do anything with an academic degree. A Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science doesn't give you a career. You have to come out as a something. You can't just have a bachelor's degree. And I think it gives you false hope in the economic world about that. So I then had this epiphany that I should do dentistry, and it was actually an interesting matter because I had always had problems with my teeth. My teeth were always having to have things done to them, and I was always in trouble from my parents because of the cost of dental treatment. So when patients complain today, I know exactly what it feels like. And so I applied for dentistry, and I actually got into dentistry, and then back on the drawing board, I had to apply for bursaries and everything, and I managed to pay for all my own education. And there are opportunities out there. Nobody needs to say they can't get a degree. There's wonderful opportunities out there. I think because he came from a very conservative background, and in the olden days, women stayed at home and looked after the children, and my father reckoned that I'd make a good private secretary for a company. And I just could not believe that I would have to have a boss all my life, and there was no ways on earth I was going to do something like that. I definitely wasn't. It sounded totally uninteresting, doing everybody's stuff and being on their beck and call. I hope I'm not putting myself out there. Yeah. Well, I just knew there was no way on earth I wasn't going to go to university. I definitely wanted to go to university, and I loved university. People were interested in what they did. You were inspired. There was enthusiasm. At school, there was a lot of apathy, and people were totally disinterested in their studies, and I found it very boring. And once I got to university, it was such fun because everybody loved what they were doing. They were doing subjects that they enjoyed, and it became a very exciting place to be. Well, I got my dental degree in July 1980, and then I was free to go out, and I managed to work for a dentist in private practice for 5 years, which was actually far too long. I should have got braver and opened my own practice much earlier, but I was hesitant, and I regret my hesitance then because I wasn't sure of myself, and I think that was my problem, because once I started my practice, my first month's turnover, I managed to cover my expenses, so I knew I was on the right track, and then I've never looked back from that. So I've been in practice now for 25 years, and it's been a wonderful experience, and I've made a lot of friends, and we've discussed so many things. And what I think is also fantastic is when you're young, people are very formal with you and treat you with a lot of reserve. But as you get older, people confide in you and tell you the most amazing things about their lives and wonderful things that have happened and problems they've had. And it's nice, in a way you can help and comfort them and support them as well. And I think I've really enjoyed that in my practice. When we trained, nobody discussed finances at all. now with my daughter's training to be a vet, they have a whole financial advice section and business development section. But in our day, nobody talked money at all. And I think you either have it or you don't. You grow up in a family where people talk about money and expenses and how to deal with them. And I think that's a critical thing in a home as well, that money is discussed and you've got an idea of prioritizing your expenses and controlling your expenditure so that you don't get yourself into a difficult situation. And of course, when you're running a business, you've got to consider your income first. I never, once I'm doing my expenditure, when I'm working on a patient, I never think about money. I think about doing the very best for my patient for their interests. And the money issue at that point is not even considered. The priority is health and doing what the patient requires. And then you are able to charge. We have a coding system, so you charge according to the coding system. And once you've got your money, then you can decide, okay, now this is a priority and that's not. And slowly you can upgrade your practice when you've got spare money so that your practice has got the most modern equipment and everything is, of course, working beautifully and properly sterilized and looking good. In 1980, when I qualified, things were different as they are today because the government had made a contract with medical aids, and if you charged medical aid rates, you were automatically paid. So you had almost a guarantee of your income coming through. Now all this is lifted. Some medical aids do pay if you charge according to medical aid rate, but some don't. And so you haven't got that guaranteed income. So because of this, I think a lot of young people want to have the financial security and they're prepared to work for one of these health clinics and get so that they know they're going to get a sort of a guaranteed income. Going into private practice today, I think, is more difficult than it was in my day because you have to build up a patient base and the money is tight and people have things that they spend on more than going to the dentist often. I just want to add that if you don't look after your teeth and you have to have one tooth restored if it's got decay and it's gone into the nerve and you get a dental abscess, it's going to cost you in the region of about 20,000 Rand for a root canal and possibly if a crown. It could cost you for one tooth that. So I think it's very important that people realize that prevention in dentistry is of prime importance and will save you a lot of money and not to mention pain and suffering. So that's important. And from a business aspect, it's very important that people's mouths and their oral hygiene is good if they're working in business. It's no good dealing with somebody who has teeth missing or has no teeth. I think it makes a very good impression on the person's health and well-being if their mouth is healthy and looks good. I think service is the main priority, is to make sure that our practice goals are that everybody walks out of there feeling happy and that they've got the best they can. I mean, sometimes we don't have that, but that is our practice goal. So we have very demanding patients and we try to fit in with what we do. I've got one patient who will not come down to my surgery until he can walk straight in. That means he never wants to sit in the waiting room. And sometimes it's not easy to control the time because an injection takes longer to work, a person has fear or panic attack, so you cannot control your time exactly. And when you've got a patient like that, so what we used to do is, because he wouldn't sit in the waiting room, he would sit at home in his lounge, and then when we were ready to see him, we'd call him, and then he didn't live far away, so then he'd come down and and then be able to walk straight in and sit in the chair. So we have had some very interesting things. I had a patient come to me at 2 o'clock in the morning for been to a disco, and this crown had fallen out, and he didn't want to go back to the disco until the crown was in. But generally, people are very reasonable and very understanding. But we have, of course, had crises in our lives. We've had things that are happen which are completely beyond your control, and so then you just have to spend more time with the patient, and generally patients are very understanding, and often, if you get yourself in a very difficult time situation, they can reschedule or do something like that, because a lot of my patients are from the area, so it's not far to go or something.